All right, let's jump right in. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are unpacking an incredibly provocative philosophical manifesto. It's short, it's punchy, and honestly, it takes absolutely zero prisoners. It's called The Architecture of the Immutable Self. If you've ever felt just totally overwhelmed by the sheer noise of modern life, the endless debates, the shifting trends, and that constant heavy pressure to belong to one tribe or another, this explainer is going to be incredibly relevant to you. We're going to break down the author's blueprints for building a sense of self that absolutely nothing can tear down. So, what actually defines your unique identity? Take a quick second and really think about that. If someone walked up to you right now and asks who you are, what's the very first thing you'd say? Would you name your profession, maybe your political leanings, or that sports team you'd practically take a bullet for? The source material we're looking at today challenges us to ask whether those identities are truly ours, or if they're kind of just costumes we've borrowed from the very noisy, very crowded world around us. Are you truly you, or are you just a collection of external labels? The author's whole core thesis here centers on this idea of the immutable self, right? An identity that is totally unique to you and completely separate from any representative group. Basically, to be immutable, meaning, unable to be changed or broken, you cannot be tied to external societal groups. If your core identity relies on a group, then your identity is actually really fragile, because groups change, they fracture, and they eventually fade. To be immutable, you have to stand entirely alone. Section 1. The Ideological Traps. Politics and Beliefs. Okay, so to get to that immutable self, we have to navigate a literal minefield of societal traps. And the author's approach here is incredibly blunt. Never base your identity on politics, and never base your identity on religious beliefs. Why? Well, because the exact moment you say, I am this political party, or I'm defined by this specific dogma, you've essentially just handed the keys to your identity over to an institution. You've made yourself dependent on a structure that is entirely outside of your own control. Now, the author uses some really intensely charged language to hammer this point home, actually stating, religion is opium drug of masses. And as an explainer, look, we aren't here to endorse or debate the theology of that at all. But we do need to look at why the author uses such heavy rhetoric. It perfectly illustrates just how aggressively the source text rejects ideological grouping. The author basically views attaching yourself to these massive, centuries-old group belief systems as a way of numbing the individual self. It's presented as a form of intellectual surrender. Which brings us to this specific line. The world will eventually change, but you won't. This is basically the rhythmic refrain of the whole manifesto. It gets repeated over and over again after every single rule. And it sets up this incredibly stark contrast. Just think about it for a second. Political borders shift, empires rise and fall, societal norms turn completely upside down over just a few decades. The external world is incredibly volatile. But your fundamental consciousness, your actual naked self, that is the constant. If you tie the constant, meaning you, to the variable, the world, you are in for a really turbulent ride. Moving on to section 2, the distraction of entertainment, escaping the self.
All right, shifting from those heavy historical traps to the everyday stuff. I mean, we all know someone whose entire mood for the week is dictated by whether their football team won or lost on Sunday, right? Well, the author issues strict instructions here to decouple your personal identity from all of that. Sports, entertainment, and celebrities. It sounds super simple, but think about how much of modern social media is entirely driven by stan culture. People literally naming themselves after pop stars and defending them like they're actual family members.
Just compare the wildly fickle nature of pop culture to the constant self. A celebrity is beloved one day, absolutely canceled the next. A sports dynasty reigns for 5 years and then they spend 20 years in the basement. A movie franchise becomes a global phenomenon, and a decade later it's just a nostalgic joke. On the flip side, you have the constant self. If your identity is wrapped up in that fickle pop culture, you are constantly at the mercy of trends you don't even control. And yep, there it is again, the anchor phrase. The world will eventually change, but you won't. When you apply that to entertainment, it really reminds us just how rapidly the pop culture landscape shifts compared to our core being. The athlete retires, the celebrity ages, the movie ends, the world changes, but you remain. Eventually, you have to wake up and live your actual life. Section 3. The groupthink trap. Breaking from the majority. So this brings us to the final, and honestly probably the most difficult set of warnings from the text. The source material takes this unyielding stance against our basic evolutionary urge to just conform. Never base your identity on a majority group, and never base it on group thinking. As human beings, we're biologically wired for safety in numbers. It feels good to agree with the crowd, you know? It feels warm and validating to be part of the majority. But the author is telling us that adopting the mindset of the crowd simply for a sense of belonging is the ultimate betrayal of the immutable self. Let's actually turn these negative commandments from the source into actionable steps. Step 1, you actively reject groupthink. Basically, when everyone in the room is nodding in agreement, you hit pause and ask what you actually believe. Step 2, reject majority rule as a proxy for truth. Just because 51% of people believe something doesn't make it a solid foundation for your identity. Step 3, by doing those two incredibly difficult things, you maintain and protect your unique self. It is an active, daily architectural process. Once again, the world will eventually change, but you won't. Hearing it for the third time now, you can really start to feel the momentum of the author's poetry here, can't you? It reinforces the ultimate danger of aligning with public opinion. I mean, what the majority believes today is often completely mocked by the majority 50 years from now. If you build your identity on the shifting sands of public consensus, your house is eventually gonna collapse. Section 4, the constant versus the variable. Finding true, unique identity. Okay, let's pull back for a second and synthesize this whole overarching argument. Here is the stark dividing line the author draws. On one side, you've got the changing world, right? Those volatile external variables like politics, religion, sports, pop culture, the crowd. All of those things are external to you. All of those things actually require your participation to survive. On the other side, you have the unique individual, the grounded internal self, unchanging in its pure essence. The entire goal of the text is to get you to sever the ropes, tying that internal self to the external world. We're going to revisit this foundational quote from the very beginning of the text just to really drive the ultimate point home. Your identity is unique to you and not representative of a group. According to the manifesto, this right here is the absolute pinnacle of individual autonomy. It is a radical, and I mean radical, call for absolute personal independence. So I want to leave you with this final, genuinely provocative thought. If you strip away your political affiliation, your religious groups, your favorite sports teams, the media you consume, and the crowd you run with, what is actually left of your identity? Who are you in the quiet of an empty room? It's a pretty daunting question, but according to the architecture of the immutable self, it is literally the only question that actually matters. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.